Advanced technology is rapidly changing the landscape of threats faced by the U.S. and its allies, presenting futuristic challenges for American defense industry leaders at a moment of rising great power competition. I'm Guy Taylor, National Security Editor at the Washington Times, and for this edition of the Threat Status Influencers series, we're lucky to be joined by Ed Zoiss, President of Space and Airborne Systems at L3Harris Technologies, a top U.S. defense company at the center of developing disruptive and innovative solutions applicable from land and naval theaters to the 21st century race for missile defense dominance in space. I recently visited with Ed at the L3Harris Melbourne, Florida headquarters, where his team covers everything from advanced signals intelligence and surveillance communication systems to small satellites and electric warfare and avionics products. Today we get the chance to speak at the company's Washington D.C. office. Ed Zoiss, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Let's jump right into this. Amid growing hypersonic missile threats from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, President Trump has demanded the development of a futuristic missile defense shield for the U.S. homeland. The Pentagon says it will be called Golden Dome, but it's not built yet. The U.S. Missile Defense Agency says it's conducting market research into innovative technologies and concepts. L3Harris is one of a small number of companies right in the middle of this. Help me unpack what it all means. What really is the threat here? And are current U.S. capabilities actually lacking?
This is an important topic for our nation. And I'm going to start by saying L3Harris has already started to build out the Golden Dome. But I wanted to talk about what the threat is, because I think it's important for your viewers and for us to be grounded truly on what the threat is. The threat traditionally has been ballistic weapons. And so if you think of a ballistic missile, you go back to your high school physics class, they follow a ballistic trajectory. So our defensive systems have been set up to understand when a weapon is launched and then the ascent angle. As soon as we understand that there's a launch and an ascent angle, we know exactly where that weapon will land. That alerts all of our ground-based and sea-based radar systems to provide intercept coordinates for our interceptors that are terrestrial based. And that's been our traditional missile defense system for many, many years. The challenge with the new class of weapons that we have is that these hypersonic weapons can now maneuver around our land-based and sea-based radar systems. And if they maneuver around our radar systems can't provide the fire control coordinates for the interceptor. So it's a real challenge now for us to defend against this new category of threat.
And have U.S. adversaries, some I just mentioned, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, have any of them actually tested hypersonics that supersede the capabilities that we have in space at this point?
Well, look, both Russia and China are testing hypersonics all the time. I think the one test that really got the nation's attention was back in 2021 when China launched what was called the Fractional Orbital Bombardment System. And that's when a hypersonic weapon was launched from China and did about a 3/4 lap around the Earth. You can read about it, it's all in the public domain. And could have stayed in orbit, but it did about a 3/4 lap around the Earth. And as it did that, it came out of orbit and then maneuvered in part around some of our defensive systems, which was really a wake-up call. Now, I think the good news for our nation is back in late 2019 and 2020, SDA and MDA put L3Harris on contract for a new class of space sensors that could track and provide fire control coordinates from space for this new class of weapon.
Well, I want to ask you about that. Take us a little bit further inside what a futuristic space missile defense solution actually looks like technically, and then specifically, how does L3Harris fit into this discussion and the solution in terms of providing missile warning, missile defense?
Yeah. Well, look, this new class now means that we have to move many of the capabilities that were ground-based or sea-based now to space. So the space sensing layer and fire control layer becomes critically important in order to counter this new threat. As I said, back in 2019, the Space Development Agency awarded L3Harris the tracking Tranche 0 which was a 4-satellite demonstrator. Where
4 separate satellites
with the
capability to do hypersonic and ballistic tracking in
Correct.
space.
Correct. And think of it as an infrared sensor. So if you were the satellite, let's just pretend you're the satellite in space looking down and you're trying to find a missile. We use infrared technology, and what we're looking for is the heat signature of that missile. The hardest part to track a hypersonic weapon is when it's cold, when the engines are shut off and it's gliding. It's just gliding. Think of it in an orbital regime. You're looking for a very, very faint heat signature against the background of the Earth. So your satellite, you're looking down, the Earth is rotating, it's going from ocean to land. You see clouds, you see heat signatures that are all over the Earth. There may be fires burning somewhere in California, all kinds of different heat signatures. And the goal of this satellite is to find that dim heat signature for that hypersonic weapon and then to track it. And we've demonstrated that over the last 13 months that it can be done from space.
In this current second Trump administration, that there is this push to dramatically expand these programs. How is L3Harris positioning itself as a leader capable of growing in scale, the number of people working on this, assets, and actually building out what you're saying is now being tested into something of a permanent system that puts the United States ahead of its adversaries in space?
We have 38 satellites under contract. We launched 5 of them on Valentine's Day of last year, 4 for SDA, 1 for MDA. The one that we launched for MDA is called the Hypersonic Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, or what we call as HBTSS. HBTSS was called out by name in the President's executive order to accelerate. It's the system that'll provide fire control. So think of it as the satellite or satellite constellation now enveloping the Earth that provides the laser, it provides the dot on that hypersonic glide vehicle as it's maneuvering. And it's providing those interceptor coordinates to either land-based, sea-based, maybe even air-based or space-based interceptors to intercept that incoming ray. And so that's a very important system to field.
Let's shift gears a little bit and kind of step back to look at the broader challenges of technological change just across the defense industrial production space. The Ronald Reagan Institute's National Security Innovation Base report card released this month assessed that Washington is stuck in a kind of self-perpetuating cycle of budgetary and appropriations dysfunction that threatens U.S. technological superiority, whether in space or on any battlefield. From where you sit at L3Harris, what is the biggest challenge faced by your industry? Is it technological change and U.S. adversary competition like we've been talking about, or is it problems with the government's budget and appropriations process, or some combination of both? And how confident are you that Washington is aware and going to be able to respond to the things in that report?
Well, first of all, I think Washington is absolutely cognizant of the threats and the challenges, which is why you've seen the executive order on Golden Dome. When we look back historically on how acquisitions occurred, they occurred over timelines that were almost a decade. I want to give Space Development Agency a tremendous amount of credit to really break that cycle. We delivered the SDA tracking Tranche 0 satellites in 34 months. We delivered the HBTSS satellite with MDA in 36 months. And so we're now on a 36-month timeline to deliver brand new next generation capability, partnering what I would call in a new model with industry. And so, look, budgets are always going to be a challenge. We know that the administration has 17 priorities. We believe L3Harris is closely aligned with those priorities, especially missile warning and missile defense, where we consider ourselves really now a leader.
I recently spent some time with the L3Harris team at the company's headquarters in Florida, but I was also at the International Defense Expo, IDEX, in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates. I saw some examples of innovative L3Harris tech, specifically Viper Shield, the new advanced warning radar system for F-16 fighter jets, but also T-47 explosive ordnance robots. These products were on display in the heart of the Middle East. Why is it so important for the U.S. defense industry to solve problems, not only for the U.S. warfighter, but also for global customers, including in the Arab world, in Asia, and other security partners?
Yeah, I mean, look, to your point, when we look at the F-16 Viper Shield electronic warfare system, it is one of the most advanced electronic warfare systems available. It's important that we provide that technology to our partners because in many cases, we can't go it alone and we will need our partners. And it's best if our partners have similar technology to what the U.S. has. Likewise with the T4 and T7 explosive ordnance defeat robots, we have a host of customers, international customers, in addition to the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Navy, using and procuring those. And when we need to operate in a coalition, when we need to operate as a joint force, that gives us the ability to, rapidly assimilate our capabilities against the threat.
At IDEX, there were so many technologies, not just the robots, but L3Harris's WestCam system that gets attached to futuristic drones on display. Can you tell me a little bit more about that system? Because that was really one of the more exciting things at that Middle East Weapons Expo.
It's a phenomenal technology. I think often call it the sky ball or the eyes in the sky. It provides surveillance and fire control abilities for a whole host of drones. From large drones to small drones, it's scalable up and down. That similar technology is also used on ground vehicles as a sight. And it really is a critical technology. It's used across all of our forces. We also had on display out at IDEX one of our IVER, which is an autonomous underwater vehicle that's being tested by the U.S. Navy. So quite a bit of technologies that L3Harris has in the sensor domain.
L3Harris is more than just advanced satellites. The company calls itself the trusted disruptor in the defense industry. Can you explain a little bit more about what that means and how does that benefit U.S. taxpayers who ultimately pay for all of this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, look, we have been providing the U.S. government capabilities for decades. We like to think of ourselves as a disruptor in that we have the mission knowledge, we have the domain expertise to provide the solutions. But historically, our customers were going through very large primes. And as they went through the large primes to acquire the capabilities that L3Harris had.
Large primes meaning the biggest defense companies in the country.
Of course. And so, it added time and added complexity. When we look at the new space acquisition model, our customers want to pick the payload. L3Harris has the world's best payloads, whether they're in RF, EOIR, or other phenomenologies, GPS. And the customers are now coming us directly to prime those systems and provide them the satellites from start to finish. And so, as I said before, we had just 38 satellites under contract on missile warning, missile defense. We have a whole host of other satellites under contract in the classified realm. And our customers' acquisition model now is coming directly to L3Harris, really disrupting their traditional ecosystem.
Ed Zoiss, so insightful, so interesting. Thank you very much for joining me for this edition of the Threat Status Influencers Series. I'm Guy Taylor. Until next time.